Welcome to episode 16 of the AI for Churches podcast. In this episode, Bart and I discuss AI for sermons and ask the question, how far is too far? I also have a conversation with Steele Billings from a company called Gloo and where he thinks the church is going next with AI. Let's get started.
Welcome to the AI for Churches podcast. Our goal is to equip pastors and church leaders with resources related to artificial intelligence, helpful for sermon prep, creative ministries, outreach, and more. We do this by providing exclusive insights from AI experts, church leaders, and innovators actively leveraging AI to amplify the gospel and reach more people for Jesus Christ. Here are your hosts, Bart Blair and Dr. David Thorne.
Well, welcome to another episode of the AI for Churches podcast. My name is Bart Blair. I'm the first voice that you hear. Well, the first voice that you hear after you've heard the intro, the official intro of the podcast. I'm the sidekick to David Thorne, who is leading our research and development team at Missional Marketing and is every day spending a lot of time living in, talking about, experimenting with things in the artificial intelligence world. And I'm just the semi-intelligent, maybe artificially intelligent sidekick on this podcast. David, welcome to another episode of your own show.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here, Bart.
Well, I'm glad it's been a little while since we have been together and talked about AI. We've both been crazy busy running in different directions. But we got some really exciting stuff happening in the world of AI because it's changing at a breakneck pace. It's like every week there are new tools. Every week tools are improving. And what is new and exciting for you in the world of AI these days?
Yeah, so one of my more favorite things I'm using right now, and I would say almost playing with, is a songwriter called Udio. And Udio is a songwriter where you can put in what you want it to write a song about, put in the type of music you want it to create, and it will create a song. And one thing you can do, which I've done, is you go to a platform like ChatGPT, you ask it to write a song for you, then you copy the lyrics over to Udio, and then Udio writes the music to it. And that way, it's a great way. It's a great party trick, great way to impress your friends, great way to sing happy birthday to people, freak people out because the songs, my son uses the term, "Hey dad, that was kind of a banger." So even some of the songs he kind of likes.
Okay. Now, does it adds like vocals, like people singing and that sort of thing, and it just kind of randomizes the voices and so forth?
It has all, you could do a rap, an acoustic, folk, any gospel, anything you want, you could think of, and it will write a song. Either it will generate its own lyrics, or you can upload lyrics that you want it to use.
And you can prompt it on the style of music and that sort of thing that you want.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that sounds fun. We should link to that in the show notes so people can go play around with. It's called Udio.
Yes, Udio.
Well, that sounds like fun. I'm sure that there is a church leader somewhere out there that could probably come up with a useful tool for that. Oh, hey, here's an idea. How about memory verse songs? Maybe I'll do this. At my church, we're about to start a teaching series through the book of Colossians. What if every week I take a unique verse from the text that we're going to be studying and get Udio to write a little jingle around that song, and I teach it to everybody and get everybody to memorize the scripture based on the little Udio song? That would be cool.
Yeah, and I've actually experimented with that. So I was trying to get it to help people to create a children's song for like John 3:16, and I didn't get it to do it perfectly, but it did get the gist of John 3:16. And so I think with a little bit more tuning of the prompt that you use, you could definitely do that. And
okay.
Every kid's ministry would probably love that.
That is pretty cool. You know what? I'm going to play around with that specifically. And I'm not going to write children's ministry songs. I'm going to write grown-up songs on how do we as grown-ups better memorize scripture. So I'm going to play around with that. That sounds like a really cool and a really fun idea. Now here's a question. If I use ChatGPT or Claude to write me some lyrics for a song, and then I use Udio to create the song, do I own the copyright on that song?
It's one of those that's an interesting question. I'll tell you what, there are present laws being tweaked and presented on these exact topics. At this moment, those things are basically non-copyrightable. Okay. So no person can necessarily own it. You could use it and you can make money on it and you kind of claim it as your own, but the thing itself is not copyrightable because of how it was created by a machine. So those laws are ever changing. It's possible by the time
that's very strange because especially if I'm paying for a subscription to the machine to use the machine, it's work for hire. Right? Like it's very complex. That's a very, very complex thing because there's no doubt that I'm sure there are people, I know there are. I've watched this YouTube video about these guys that are using AI to like write books and they're publishing like 10 books a day on Kindle Direct Publishing using AI tools to simply write these books. I mean, they're from what I understand, it's garbage. It's not like really good content, but they're publishing all these books. And because of the volume of books that they're publishing, people are buying them. And they're actually making lots of money by basically gaming the system with content that isn't really good. And they're just generating a lot of stuff out of AI. So that's it's a slippery slope, I think. Yeah.
And like I said, it's being addressed. Like there are laws that are kind of being thought through related to copyright and AI. Again, that doesn't mean that you can't make money off of it.
Yeah.
It just means that you can't copyright it yourself. Only human created content can be copyrighted. And now when you upload various like books to a platform, it'll ask you, hey, was this made by a human or a non-human?
Yeah. Yeah. I've published some things on Amazon, some Bible studies, some journals and things like that. And there are little questions that you have to answer. Now, there's nothing that Amazon does with that information today, but it asks you if there were parts of or large sections of your content created by AI, whether that's text or images or translations. It asks for specifically all three of those things. Did you use an AI tool to translate this? Did you use AI to create any of the graphics, images, or artwork? Did you use AI? It asks for which tools that you use. And it kind of gives you three categories. It's like, it was largely created by AI, it was created by AI and moderately edited, or it was created by AI and heavily edited. And that's kind of the categories that they put in there. Speaking of copyright and ownership, one of the things that's always been kind of an interesting thing in the church space is a pastor's sermons and ownership of sermons. So in larger churches, I don't really know all of the logistics and the ins and outs of these things, but in many large churches, pastors will write books and publish books. And sometimes those books go on to be best-selling books. And a lot of times the books are based on content that they have written in sermons, study that they've done as they prep sermons. And, there is in the marketplace typically pretty specific rules on work for hire. So, if you're an engineer and you work for a company that does engineering work, you have to be very, very careful in the way that you do engineering work that might be unrelated to the job that you have, because the company that you work for could still own what you design or engineer, even if it's not directly related to the work that you're doing. Some very interesting laws and nuance there. Technically, by right of the law, I think every sermon that a pastor writes is technically work for hire. Like it is content created by the pastor, but for the church. And therefore, any church could literally probably argue ownership over that content. Let's talk about ownership of content by the pastor as it relates to using AI in the creation of sermons or supportive sermons. And how much, I know this is an ongoing debate, how much should a pastor disclose about their use of AI? We've talked about this before. You don't want to Sesame Street the sermons. This week's sermon was brought to you by the letter G, right? We don't want to do that. But I know that there's been some debate. There was a good long thread in the AI for Churches Facebook group on this particular topic. Share me some of your takeaways on that.
Yeah, it is helpful. We need to keep talking about this, and we need to even have differences of opinion on it. Like, we need to keep chewing on it. I would say that the people in the AI for Churches Facebook group kind of lean towards, why do we need to say anything at all? And I think I have a little bit of pushback in that there is a spot where we have to say something. And I think the spot where that nuance is when we are representing a person or their persona or their voice or their visual image in a way that is not them. So then we would need to make it known that is an AI generated person. I think that's where my line goes, because it goes to the honesty of that image or video or voice represents the pastor's viewpoint, but it is not the pastor. Okay. That's my line.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're probably further out than I am. I'm going to probably err a little more conservatively on that. And I think I started to type a response in the Facebook group, and then I realized, you know what? In a few sentences, I can't really express the nuance of the way that I feel about this. So I'm not going to type it because I didn't want to start a fight. But we've talked about this in the podcast before. There's a difference between AI assisted and AI generated.
Yeah.
And when the artificial intelligence is actually creating something from nothing, which would be like the case of Udio or whatever that tool is that you were just talking about, right? It creates a song from nothing but some prompts. You're right. I think that's AI generated. That's not AI assisted. If a pastor is using, number one, a pastor should never use AI to simply generate their content. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that. So should there ever be a situation where a pastor has to disclose it? If he's just using it the way that we always coach pastors to use it, which is as a brainstorm buddy, as a personal assistant, as a tool that can help build some efficiencies into your process, you should probably never have to disclose it. If you are actually using an AI tool to completely generate the content that you're communicating, and you are representing that this is coming out of you as a result of your own personal study, revelation, life experience, I just think that's wrong. And so you should never have to disclose it, because you should never be doing that. Okay. If you're doing that, stop doing that. And then you don't ever have to disclose anything. I guess that's my point.
Yeah. And the irony there is anyone who would do that would probably be the least likely to say that they have done that. So I have a perfect example from back in the day. I went to a church during high school, and the pastor's sermons, he must have been, I don't know, to me, he felt like he was 80 years old, and he had the most monotone voice, and he read off these little yellow pieces of paper, and he just read this sermon in the most monotone. I think I wanted to fall asleep every single week. I think I shadowed him when I was a junior. And I think he even told me that he got his sermons from somewhere. Okay. I don't think he wrote his own sermons.
Wow.
And so you shouldn't do that. And so the only reason I bring that up is because AI isn't the problem. It just presents a different tool to accomplish. It touches on the same heart, regardless of what tool you use. AI just presents a new and different tool to try to do the same thing.
Very interesting. Well, we could ramble on about this particular topic forever, but let's not, because, well, you have an interview to share with us today. Give us a little bit of an intro into what we're going to hear in this particular interview.
Yeah. So I'm interviewing Steele Billings, and Steele Billings is awesome. When it comes to AI in the church world, Steele Billings is connected with Gloo. And I went to something called a hackathon that Gloo sponsored multiple months ago. It was about, I don't know, it was a while ago. But at this hackathon, Gloo invited all, like, I don't know, there was like 40 different teams there who were coming up with ideas of ways AI could help the church. And it was amazing. It was a really cool weekend. So I catch up with Gloo, with Steele, who also has the coolest name ever.
Steele Billings. That is a cool name. It sounds like some sort of, I don't know, superhero, some Western guy. Yeah.
Like he should be a cowboy, right?
Yeah.
But he's really cool. And so we talk about the hackathon, what he learned, what Gloo's working on, where does he think that AI in the church is going next. It was a great interview. So you guys are going to love it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's awesome. David, thanks for hanging out with me. Looking forward to this particular interview. For those of you who have not yet subscribed, make sure that you do that so that you don't miss any future episodes of this podcast. We're attempting to release 2 episodes per month, and sometimes we win and sometimes we lose, but we're doing the best that we can. And if you find the content to be helpful, make sure that you leave us a rating or a review wherever you are consuming this content. Thanks again. Here's David Thorne and his interview with Steele Billings.
Hi, everyone. I'm here with Steele Billings from Gloo. Hey, Steele.
Hey, David. Happy to be here.
Yeah. Glad to chat with you. Steele and I were just chatting just briefly before we jumped on this call that I'm in Cleveland, Ohio, and it's currently snowing. And my kids are off school today. And Steele is in Colorado. And
actually,
your kids are...
I'm in Memphis, Tennessee today.
Memphis. Oh, well, yes. And your kids are off school.
My kids are out of school. We are day 4 out of school, and expecting day 5 to be announced pretty soon. So everybody pray for my wife and her sanity. She's doing great. We're battling through it. But yeah, 4 snow days in a row here in Memphis, Tennessee, thanks to 5 inches of snow.
Yes, so some of you may be listening, and everyone has a different experience with what snow does to where you live. Sometimes people in like North Carolina, it like threatens to snow. And then they call off for like 2 weeks. So, that's not quite where you are. You're at, just call off for a week if you get an inch or 2 or something, that kind of stuff. But you said you have some rain going on too.
We think we've got some rain coming. We had a lot of freezing rain yesterday, and this snow is a little, it's kind of resilient. It hasn't let up yet. So I'm looking out the window at roads covered in ice and snow, and a city that is shut down, and everybody wondering if there's bread and milk at the grocery store.
Yes, that happens. Well, Steele works for Gloo, and Steele, could you give us, for people who are out there and have no idea what Gloo is, other than a fastening device that connects things together, to give us some background about what Gloo is and how Gloo is connected to the topic of artificial intelligence in the church?
Yeah, no, it's such a great question. Two big things there. So let me just start with a quick overview of Gloo, maybe. So I am currently the head of artificial intelligence and investments at Gloo, and Gloo is a technology company based out of Colorado. We've been around for about 13 years. Our mission is to release the passion in every person to champion the growth of another. And, we can rattle that off at Gloo. That's something that we talk about very, very frequently as a team, is just constantly pointing back to our mission: release globally the passion in every person to champion the growth of another. And that just means, that we pursue how the most advanced technologies in the world could be used to help people grow. We believe that every person was created by their creator with something in their heart to have this aspiration of growth, we also believe that the Creator instilled in all of us this desire to help other people grow. And so when we think about releasing the passion in every person to champion the growth of another, we're always asking, what's the data that would help people do that championing job? What are the applications or the technology that would help people do that championing job? And so we think a lot about technology and how the most advanced technologies can serve this role where, typically Silicon Valley is not asking that question. We see a lot of technology being used for maybe very secular reasons. We tend to challenge with questions like, how might God be pleased by this powerful technology being used for God's purposes? So that's a lot of what we think about at Gloo. Mm-hmm. We serve pastors, mentors, youth sports coaches, Sunday school teachers, counselors, therapists. Those are the types of individuals that we would put in that champions bucket. And our tech platform really aims at serving those individuals as the users and all of the partners. We do talk about the big C church a lot. And so when we say champions, we aren't necessarily just thinking about those individuals that are working at the most local level. We're also thinking about those larger parachurch ministries. We're thinking about denominations. We're thinking about major outreach campaigns and even film productions. And so that's, to us, that is the big C church, all working collectively. So those are some of the things that we focus on at Gloo.
I just wish you guys thought a little bigger. Just kidding, obviously.
Well, we have a founder who thinks pretty big. Our founder is Scott Beck, and our founder has been involved with some major organizations in his lifetime. He helped begin and build Blockbuster to what it became. He exited Blockbuster in the early 90s. He started a company called Boston Chicken, or took that and turned it into Boston Market, which most of the world knows. He's been a part of things like Angie's and Home Advisor. He's also been a part of some of the largest ministries in the world. And so we have a founder who thinks big, and that tends to rub off on the team.
Yeah, that's very cool. And that's one of those cool things that people are like, oh, I have heard of those things. And that's who you guys, who started Gloo. And now tell us about how you specifically got into the AI conversation. And then there's something you and I have both been a part of in the last 6 months that we can talk about. But just tell us, how did Gloo get into the AI conversation?
Yeah, so Gloo really got into AI back in 2017, 2018. We started watching this emerging conversation around big data. There were a lot of headlines around big data and, is data good? Is data bad? Is it scary? What are all the negative ways that people are using data? What about our privacy? We started seeing these secular companies use it for really powerful use cases related to, monopolistic use cases, if you want to call them powerful. American Express, to give you an example and to get practical, American Express was using data. Back then, they had this data model that could predict divorce up to 2 years before a divorce happened with an 80% accuracy rate. This is a very widely publicized and discussed topic. It's pretty well known. And there's a lot of articles out there you can go check out. But they did that just by taking certain data points about people that had American Express credit cards. And I think Visa was even involved in this too. So they had this massive data set. And that's where the term big data came together. Well, then they started using computers to do machine learning on top of that, right? The computers, instead of humans analyzing all of that data, they started teaching computers how to do this, 24/7 at speeds that humans could not do. That's where these terms like machine learning and data modeling come together, and they form these massive data sets called big data. So Gloo started asking the question back then of how could we use this technology for God's purposes, like I mentioned earlier. And what we started to look at would be things like, how might we tell a church leader, for example, that, hey, there's, X number of people in your church that are showing signs that their marriage might be in trouble. And, we're not going to go to the point of showing first names and last names on a list that you can go knock on their doors and talk to one-on-one necessarily. But we can tell you that, hey, this is the area of your church where those people typically are. This is the type of content that they might be interested in. And it would allow you to kind of point your ministry at that specific problem and start to think about how you're going to solve it in your local context. And that's just one example of many that we put together. Back in 2018, we launched a platform called Gloo Insights. And it was a tool that churches could use and start to kind of make that data practical for ministry applications. So that's really how we got started in AI. Leading up to some of the latest things that we did back in 2023 and mid 2023, we launched this initiative called the AI and the Church Initiative. And it had several parts to it. One was a hackathon that you guys were a part of. We had a lot of fun there. We can talk some more about that. Another was an investment fund that we said, this is going to take a lot of capital. And there's a lot of organizations and secular entities out there that are way beyond us. They're way past us in the amount of money that they've spent, in the economies that they've been able to gather together, and even the power. And we don't know if they intend to use AI for good. How might we be a force collectively as the Big C Church to say, hey, God is not surprised by AI, and we should pursue his purposes for artificial intelligence. And so we saw an opportunity where the church needed some leadership and it needed some collective power to come together. And that's the AI and the Church Initiative as a whole. So that investment fund came together to invest in technologies that are responsibly advancing artificial intelligence. We also did an AI in the Church survey. It was actually one of the first things that we did was just to do a landscape of, hey, what are pastors thinking about artificial intelligence? How many of them are equipped? Who lacks the equipping? Who are the influencers that they're trusting on these topics? What about the congregants out there? Our friends at Barna are getting ready to release some new studies that they've been doing around artificial intelligence. I think just next week, I'm not sure the air date of this, but on January 22nd, Barna is doing a big webcast around artificial intelligence and faith. And what are average people inside of our churches thinking about AI, and how much do they trust the church to even speak to the topic? These are some of the work streams that got kicked off in that AI and the Church Initiative. It all started with just us saying, hey, there's an opportunity to provide some leadership. For us, it's never about our voice being the loudest on these topics. It's always about us just providing a stage for other people's voices. Other thought leaders like yourself, David, having a stage and resources and partnerships to be able to expand your own thoughts, your own platform, and just provide the education and resourcing that you've pulled together.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Yeah, and then specifically, that's where Steele and I met. And I went to the hackathon. Yeah, and so how about give a brief overview of what the hackathon was, and I can add just what I saw and learned from it as well. Yeah, and then we can both then you can just I love to think it'd be helpful for people to hear kind of what has come from that.
Well, a hackathon. Let me just define it first, right? It is because we had to do this at the beginning. We had to say, hey, what are we going to call this thing? Is it a hackathon? Is it a devathon? Is it a codeathon? And we were like, hey, this is in the church. Is the word hack going to be seen as something negative? And maybe we shouldn't call it that. There was a lot of that went into it in the first place. But a hackathon, for any of those who maybe aren't totally familiar with it, is a very small window of time usually, or it's a set window of time that developers, software engineers, people are coming together, and they typically are given a challenge. And so they might be given one challenge, they might be given 6 challenges. And the challenge ultimately says, hey, here's a problem out in the world today. You have 24 hours to go solve it. You have 48 hours to go solve it. You have 30 days to go solve it, whatever that window of time is. And then we're going to give some sort of an award based on who has the best solution. Usually what that means is that people are writing code overnight. They're designing things. You saw it actually play out at our hackathon. People are, staying up as late as they can, going to the couch, getting a 2-hour nap, coming back to the computer. Oftentimes these individuals are working in teams. And so that's really a hackathon. And we said, hey, let's pull together a hackathon with some of the brightest minds and the best engineers who are also aligned to faith, and say, hey, we agree that this technology should be used to glorify God. We're going to come together and we're going to do this. So a lot went into it. One of the first things that I'll call out, Gloo had never done a hackathon before up to this point. We had talked about it for years. We had always wanted to do one, but we had never really done one. So we called some friends of ours who we knew had a ton of experience doing hackathons, Nick and Allie. They're a team that spend their days at NASA. They work for NASA. They spend their weekends putting on hackathons, just like this all over the world. Their organization is called Quite Uncommon. And so they came together, they partnered with us. And the first thing they said is, when do you want to do this hackathon? We said, well, we want to do it in October. Mind you, this is June when we're having this conversation. We said, how long does it typically take to do a hackathon? They said, typically 6 months minimum planning. We said, okay, so we have about 3.5 months. Can we get it done? And we fought and, worked together. We had a lot of people lean in. We had about 20 partners in total leaning in and just providing some thought leadership and some guidance on things. We put together 4 challenges. One was around how artificial intelligence could help with discipleship and evangelism. We called it Equipping the Saints. Another one was called Intimacy with God, which is a part of YouVersion's mission statement. We invited the Chief Technology Officer from YouVersion, James Chung, to come be a judge and a challenge leader over that area. And that intimacy with God was, how could artificial intelligence actually help people grow closer to God? There's a lot of fear that AI is going to reduce our dependency on God, and create more separation between man and God. And our question was, well, what about the opposite? How could it get us closer to God? So how could AI, help us spend more time in the Word and help us engage with Scripture, at a more intimate level, and on and on. Another one was just around, beyond boundaries, and, how can we do major things that maybe we haven't even thought of with AI? And so that's an example of some of the challenges that we set. And then the last thing that I'll mention is we put up a sizable prize. We knew that we didn't want this to just be some mediocre hackathon. We were ready to really invest a lot of money, time, and energy in some significant, team resources. Even a lot of our own team spent nights and weekends all throughout the summer and into the early fall just preparing for this. We ended up hosting it at our offices in Boulder, Colorado. We, from just the outcomes, we didn't know what we didn't know, right? And we didn't know what to expect, who would show up, who would want to be a part of it. But we knew if we went big, if we put our best effort into it and we trusted God with the outcomes, that God would show up. And our hope was that, man, on the other side of it, something would happen. We'd go, only God could have done that. We expected just under 20 teams by our forecast to be a part of it. We ended up with 41 teams a part of it. That's 41 submissions that we had. When we looked at that, we said, there's not enough time. There's just no way we're going to be able to do all this. We're not going to be able to judge things appropriately. Things went seamlessly throughout the weekend. I would love to hear your feedback. Maybe you saw some things, but everything just worked and it went well. And the outcomes were, people like weeping about the experience that they had that weekend. People talking about how they were fulfilled and inspired in ways that they never thought was possible. They didn't know there was a community of people out with these same aspirations. And so we were extremely fulfilled and just grateful at what God had done that weekend in October in Boulder. One of my favorite quotes was that 10 years from now, we might look back at a seismic shift in how we think about and do ministry in America, and we'll be able to draw a dotted line back to a weekend that happened in Boulder, Colorado, because of some of the things that were created, some of the ideas that were sparked. And that was all we needed. And so great success, lots of excitement, all thanks to, people like you guys who came out and spent your weekend with us and, just really gave your all.
Yeah, I had a great experience there. And one thing just that we just said that made me think about is one of the things in that original, like the Barna research was saying how, people in our congregations tend to have some concerns about the use of AI and that kind of stuff at the outset. But what I love about Gloo's initiative and just kind of stuff like why we have this podcast and that kind of stuff is I feel like we have this moment where typically church ends up being like at least 10 to 15 years behind the marketplace and every new technology that exists. From pews to like where our church is going to split because we might need to have chairs instead of pews, or put a screen to have an electronic device versus a hymnal. and that kind of stuff. I mean, for some of that stuff, that was almost like we were 100 years behind, some of those technologies. But what very much excites me and excites us at Missional Marketing is it feels like we're actually not that far behind in this moment. And we actually have the ability to maybe scrunch down that 15-year gap to like, a year or two. And maybe even in some ways, we could be right on par with any company, any secular company that's out there.
Right.
If we put our foot on the gas right this second. So I just to your point of that excites us at Missional Marketing. And I'm sure that excites you as well.
Totally. Man, and that's something that's not being talked about enough is the opportunity that artificial intelligence actually presents for the global church. For perhaps the first time in any of our lifetimes, technology is at a place where people are starting to question, things that the Bible says a whole lot about, such as what's the source of intelligence, right? There's this belief out there in posthumanism. That's a huge topic around artificial intelligence. Posthumanism says that, if humans go extinct, intelligence will go beyond human extinction. And so therefore intelligence is not a constraint or it's not constrained to humanity. And intelligence is actually the all-powerful being, and it's the eternal being. It's just the idea of intelligence, that it's always been around and it will always be around even beyond human existence. That's posthumanism. Posthumanism is not aligned with Scripture, right? And so we get to say, hey, actually, the Bible has something to say about this. And also, there was this guy named Jesus who, walked the earth, and he told us what good was. And so we have this opportunity to go out and say, hey, let's align this idea that intelligence is actually from a particular source, but this new technology can be used for good and for very powerful ways. Totally agree with you that we do have an opportunity to kind of catch up to that lag that we've been suffering from for decades in the church. Great word.
Yeah, I love that. When we talk with churches all the time, that's where these things of, hey church, like anything that wants to grow in the world, like that doesn't happen on accident. They put energy into it, and that's where the church is the only place where, I don't know, you get pushback about like, well, but can't we just do what we've always done and just reap the results we've always reaped? And anyways, we could probably talk about that.
Imagine if the church would have said, 10, 20 years ago, we choose to sit this internet thing out. Right. Mm-hmm. And, you had that dawn of the internet and everybody, it was evil. You had that Brian Gumbel moment with Katie Couric. And what is the internet anyway? Everybody's seen that clip. We're very much there. Like, what is artificial intelligence? What is blockchain? What is Web3? What are these things? Some of them are going to become more and more normalized into our everyday life. And, thankfully we chose not to sit the internet out. Thankfully, churches are online streaming and reaching people all over the world, 24/7. Thankfully, YouTube is saturated with, scripture and people preaching the word of God, and churches are online. And, now as ChatGPT starts to crawl the entire internet, there is so much, scriptural content that is included in ChatGPT because the church chose not to sit the internet age out, and you're already influencing artificial intelligence, whether you know it or not. So, yeah.
So and also go back to the hackathon, to what Steele said is there was all these people. So all these people, landed in Boulder, Colorado, and it's a really cool little city there it was a beautiful little place. And then we just, these little teams found a nook and cranny across every nook and cranny we could find. We would hunker down and just start working. And then, and across, they have about 3 or 4 buildings that are right there in walking distance of each other. And they were wonderful hosts. They had all these snacks and lunches and opportunities. And you would just work until you got tired and then go talk with some people. And that was probably like my favorite part, is just meeting people and hearing other people's ideas.
That's great to hear.
And one of the benefits of that for me is I feel like I'm still reaping the benefits of it because I keep meeting people who are at the hackathon. So even if I didn't meet them at the hackathon, I meet them and we were both there. And so it immediately creates this like level playing field of, oh yeah, like I was there too. And it kind of gives us a common, framework to build upon, where even if we hadn't met each other there, we know we're kind of working towards the same stuff. And so I feel like I said, I keep finding that I meet somebody and like, oh yeah, I went to this thing called the hackathon. I was like, I went to that too. So it was, that's really cool.
That's great. It's always cool to see how big God's handiwork is, and you go to events like that and you realize, man, there's a lot of other people who are thinking in this way that I thought maybe I was alone in. So yeah, that's great to hear that community was so valuable.
Yeah. And so from that, I would love to hear kind of now, at the time of this recording, we're in, later January. The hackathon was in October. How about tell us a little bit about what kind of has come from that? Oh, and just like you said, you guys gave out a whole bunch of monetary awards. There was like the best shoe award, which, not that necessarily, propelled the kingdom of God forward or anything, but it was awesome. And the shoes that won were quite extraordinary.
They were pretty cool.
Yeah.
They looked like a mirror, I think. Yeah. I think the best shoe award was just a fun, way to kind of like, hey, break up. There's a lot of seriousness too, there was a lot of community, but there was a lot of intense lack of sleep, right? We'll put people in a different mode. And so we gave out $250,000 in cash prizes that day, that Sunday of the hackathon as we closed out. A team from Basil Technologies actually won that award. And what we were, the judges were so compelled by the submission that they had was one, we awarded based on the quality of code, to the quality of design, to the quality of overall potential impact. And overall potential impact was the most awarded points category. And so we looked at this, the submission that they had. It was the ability to take a bunch of inputs very quickly, such as I'm a parent and I'm trying to create biblical material for my child who is 7 years old, who struggles with anxiety based on this topic, with these types of graphics that, they tend to be drawn to. And so you take all of these different inputs and you throw it together and, within seconds, a very well illustrated children's book is created that I can read to my kids at night to teach them some sort of biblical lesson, to help them through something they're going through in life. And we just thought, man, what a powerful thing that if we started to allow parents, for example, to leverage the power of AI, to help their children grow. So you think about parents in a champion position, helping their kids become all that God created them to be. What a powerful opportunity. So Basil Tech took home that top prize. We had several other awards that, included things like, helping people dig through scripture in a really intimate way based on, certain characters of the Bible that they felt most relation to. There were a lot of things like that. Some of the projects that have become the most exciting are, even some of the infrastructure that continues to go on. There's a group called Bible Chat, for example. They are building infrastructure. What I mean by infrastructure is it may not be technology that you would use on a day-to-day basis, or at least you think about using on a day-to-day basis, but that technology sits on top of the technology that these guys built as part of their hackathon project. And, it's a Christian large language model a little bit. So they're allowing other apps to leverage this large language model that is very well trusted. You don't have to wonder, hey, is this built by a corporation that maybe doesn't have values that I would personally align with? So that infrastructure type of technology is some of the stuff that excites me the most, because when you talk about the church really catching up to the technology curve, that's a huge opportunity, is for us to, not become so dependent on these organizations that have built all of this infrastructure that we're just building our websites on top of, we're building our own apps on top of, but we ourselves get to build infrastructure that other people build their apps on top of. That's a powerful opportunity for the Big C church to be in that conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And how about, is there anything like peeking behind the curtain of anything else that came out of the hackathon that you guys are working on, that you're excited about, like stuff that we should have our eyes on that might be coming out in the next 6 months, or things that, just stuff that maybe was hackathon originated that might be coming down the path?
Well, one of the things is less of a maybe specific product, and there were many of those products. Many of them have already come out, by the way. There's a lot of projects we could talk about that were a part of it, but one in particular that I'm really excited about. Something happened at the very beginning of the hackathon that maybe not everybody has heard about just yet, and it's called the AI Working Group. And the AI Working Group was the gathering of some of the top minds in theology, in legal and privacy, data use, in artificial intelligence, and just in general technology. And we invited these folks in. There were about 20 of them in total that came in, and they were a part of this conversation around how should AI be used in the church? What are the guide rails that we should put around artificial intelligence if we're going to think about it from a moral and ethical perspective? That working group spun off. It was a part of a larger initiative that we started called the Trust Council. And the Trust Council is a very similar setting, but much more broad. We go to events. We kind of have these back office gatherings with some of these top leaders. And we say, hey, what is God telling you about AI? Where are you getting checks in your spirit when we talk about these types of technologies? And we all try to get to this discernment layer. That Trust Council is growing every day. There's lots of tools that have come out of that. One of those tools is an AI assessment that church leaders, can take and go, hey, here's where you are in your own level of understanding and awareness around artificial intelligence. And based on that, you're either ready to maybe preach a sermon to help prepare the parents in your church about the struggles that, maybe their teenagers are going to have growing up in the AI age, for example. Snapchat, where a lot of teenagers are, my AI, it's kind of an AI pal. People are building relationships with that AI. Who's preparing the teenagers of that? Who's preparing the parents to have conversations with their teenagers about those things? We believe that there's a lot of responsibility in the pulpit to do those things. So how are we equipping church leaders to do that? The Trust Council is doing a lot of work around that. And, some other areas that we're working on at Gloo is how might we use artificial intelligence and then other means of technology to just, help route people to things that will solve problems that they're experiencing. We saw in 2020 during the pandemic, what was great about the pandemic is that if I didn't have time to go to 5 conferences before the pandemic, all 5 of those conferences were virtual in 2020. And so I had the ability to go to these conferences that I couldn't do because I was just a virtual conference. I was logging into a webinar. That turned in really quickly to pastors feeling this burden of decision, right? It was, we labeled it decision fatigue. How do I spend my time? How do I know which piece of content I can spend this 30 minutes? That's the only 30 minutes I'm going to have all day. And so something that we've been working on for the last few years, AI has really helped us speed up this project, is the Gloo Marketplace, which is in the process of going live now. And it is where we hope champions will find content, technology, data, and services that will help them solve problems on a pretty frequent basis and really become a trusted place that they can find any of those types of things. And then there's some capabilities that are being circled around that will help those church leaders use things like a stored wallet, for example, to say, hey, everybody on my staff, you get this set budget and you can spend this budget in any of these trusted resources. So that's something that we're working on proper at Gloo that AI has definitely helped us to speed up. But I'm probably most excited to answer your question around the work that's spinning off around that Trust Council.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's one of those things that it's what I love about that is, when I talk with churches, the whole concept of, like fearing that AI is going to take over the world, and all those fears, like just these concerns and fears. And what I love is to be able to say that there are people who are responsibly considering the use and application of AI as a tool for ministry, and that our churches can just know that there are adults considering these things, and that I find that just churches knowing that is helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I would invite just creators and developers, you have such a big audience, David, and a wide audience that you're talking to, whether it's church leaders or even developers, and some of the ones who are sort of geeking out on AI, and like we're watching the CES threads of like what came out at CES, and AI took over CES. One of the things that came out at CES that kind of caught my attention is a project that Robert Downey Jr., who we all know as Iron Man. Sorry if for anybody that liked Robert Downey Jr. prior to Marvel, but he's Iron Man. He is a big investor in a company who's thinking about how AI is going to solve just common problems, such as, hey, I get 10 spam calls a day. How come we can't solve that problem, right? And how can AI get in there and solve that problem? And he's thinking about just common everyday problems that we experience. He's going, AI is going to solve this. A lot of the projects that we've seen hit the market, if you will, so far are around a very common thread of saving time and saving money. Moretu Gouda is a professor at Biola, and we did a podcast with him in kind of mid 2023. And I asked him what were his thoughts around just AI. It was an this wasn't part of the podcast. This was kind of an introductory conversation we had, but we have these introductory conversations. And he said, I'm so tired of hearing pastors talk about how AI is going to save them all this time. What if that is not God's will to save a pastor a bunch of time? What if it's God's will to just leverage artificial intelligence to build bigger relationships? And we have this saying around Gloo that technology by itself is not a catalyst for growth. Relationships catalyze growth. And so what if it's not God's will to help us all to this destination faster using AI? Because God's going, it's not about the destination, guys. It's about the journey that I've, put each one of you on, and it's unique to each one of you. And AI is not just about skipping over that journey, but it's instead enriching that journey. And so the technology that I get really excited about is sort of in that line that Robert Downey Jr. seems to be investing in. And that is saving money and time is awesome, guys. Like, I'm not here to discredit that at all. There's a lot of great projects that you guys are a part of too, by the way. Huge fan. I went back and I watched y'all's hackathon submission video too. And I was like, man, this is awesome stuff. I want to ask you about where you guys are with that. Sermon Spark, and just kind of some additional things like sermon evaluation tools that you guys were working on that are just so cool. But like, what are the technologies that are going to solve problems that we did not know could be solved prior to artificial intelligence? And AI is going to help us solve those problems. It's going to help us create value that we were never able to create before. And so if there's any creators out there listening, that would be my call to you is maybe think outside of the box of, how can this save people money or save people time? And how can this create a value or solve a problem that the world hasn't been able to solve before? I think that's a cool challenge.
Yeah. And I love the idea of time and money, but also relationships. And that's one thing I think is be helpful. So if you're listening to this, you might be a church leader or a pastor, and you're thinking, well, I'm not a developer. I'm not a coder person, which I'm not. But you might be listening to this and you're saying, man, I wish there was a thing that could help me to do blank better. And what I love about what you would say is, yes, is there a thing that existed that could help you save time, save money, but is there something that's holding your church back from building better relationships, better discipleship? And then what is that dream? What is that thing that you could imagine? And that's where, places like Gloo and missional marketing, we want to be a landing spot where we can dream together and figure out how can we help make those dreams a reality.
Yeah.
what are some things that if like, yeah, taking that one step further, are there any things and problems, relationship problems that you've thought about, discipleship problems, church problems that you wish somebody would create that doesn't exist right now?
Well, I'll give you an example of something that we've kind of started seeing how it could solve problems with. We just started it back in 2023 and testing how AI would help with it. And there are opportunities to improve it and enhance it and take it further. So I'll start with that. And it is this idea of routing people who need help to people who can provide help. So, for example, we have a program at Gloo that we call Reach, and it is all these outreach campaigns, which there's now north of 30 of them, I think, that are participating all around the globe. And they find people in specific felt needs, whether it is anxiety or sadness, loneliness, all these types of keywords. And what this came from this research that many partners conducted alongside of us. And what we found is that when people need help, they're not walking into churches on Sunday looking for that help. They're going to Google. And so how do we go meet that need, and say, hey, we're going to be there. We're going to have the church show up digitally when those people go out looking on Google. So when they go look for help, how do we show up with some encouragement, but also a call to action? What we were originally experiencing was a little bit disheartening. People were filling out forms. We had humans watching every single form come in and then try to match that form to somebody who could follow up with that person. That follow-up might take 24 hours, 48 hours before somebody would get back to that person. And then the chances of that person that filled out that form ever then making contact with that person at the church was very low. And we were like, man, this isn't going to work. So then we started taking machine learning approaches to it. And we started saying, okay, what do we know about that person that just filled out that form? For example, we know their zip code because they told us their zip code. We know the topic that they came through because of the ad that they clicked on, or the Google result that they clicked on. We know the area of the church, that signed up to respond. And we've got 5 churches over there, but hey, one of them has turned off their status because they went on vacation. Another one just received an Explorer yesterday. This one hasn't received anybody in 2 days. Let's pass them to that person. They might have the most capacity right now. And so what's been really cool is that within seconds, milliseconds even, from the time that somebody clicks that form submission online to the time that they get routed to a local person in a church via a text message, that person in a church can get a text message. Hey, somebody's looking to have a conversation, or they've got a question about this. A lot of them, by the way, are people who have said, I just made a decision to follow Christ and I don't know what my next steps are. These are people in your city right now who are doing these types of things. Hundreds of thousands. We just passed the 300,000 mark of people who have filled out these forms that we're routing to local churches. We were able to use artificial intelligence or a variation of it to solve that gap of somebody filling out that form to then never actually having a conversation or building a relationship. Now we can get it north of 85% of those things can happen if we get it routed to the right person who has the right amount of capacity, and within minutes they're able to respond. That conversation actually happens, and that life change can actually happen and take place. Artificial intelligence made that possible. It wasn't about saving time or money necessarily. It was about solving a problem that we had not been able to solve before. And so then apply that to other areas in life. For instance, Carey Nieuwhof used to talk about this idea of invisible member. And this, I'm going to fudge his terms because this was years ago. I heard him talking about this, but it's this person that sits in your church and they're kind of latent. They're quiet. They're not saying anything. They're not volunteering on the weekends until one day the Lord does something in their heart and all of a sudden something clicks, right? And then all of a sudden they raise their hand and they go, I'm ready. Whether, I grew up in a church where Adrian Rogers used to have a call to action at the end of every single sermon. Come down the aisle, come forward, come to Jesus is what he would say. And so every week somebody had the opportunity, but people raise their hand and they go, okay, I'm ready to get on the field, put me in a place, help me to serve, I'm ready to get baptized, whatever that is. If you miss that opportunity, it may never happen again where they feel that call, right? And they raise their hand. And so we now have the opportunity to capture that intent and that desire in somebody, and within seconds, get it to the person that they could be talking to, build that relationship, help that person take the right next step. And AI is able to route all these things, within seconds. It's able to look at thousands of data points on one side and go, okay, well, now let's look at all the options over here on the other side and let's make that match. We call that the match engine. And that is one of the things that we've been working on for quite a while at Gloo too.
Yeah. And that's one of those like things like when we talk about AI and how AI will soon, if not already, is being built into the fabric of every single thing we do. And that's where like you're talking about an engine behind the scene that's going to continue to get better and better and better at making the right connection to the right, person, the right person to the right church. Yeah. And that's like that's a perfect example where like I talk to churches all the time about how AI is being developed behind the scenes and it's being built into everything, whether you like it or not, or whether you know it or not, it's into everything. And that's a perfect example where we want that AI to keep getting better and better and better, because the better it gets, the smarter it gets at making that connection. That's the more likely that person is going to be connected as quickly as possible to the right spot, have the right follow-up and all that kind of stuff. Something that I don't know that everyone knows, and so I want to make sure that people know, is that Gloo offers basically a free chat platform, right?
Yeah, our texting tool. Yeah, so we have this belief that texting is a very common use of communication, just like emailing. And that is a modern day internet browser. Internet browsers help spread information left and right. Well, so do texting and emailing. And just like internet browsers, most people don't pay. There's other economic models that sustain them. We figured out the right economic models that would sustain the texting and communication layer so that we could make it free to churches. And ultimately, texting is a way to activate all of these things. So in Gloo, if you're not a Gloo user, Gloo does have a platform that you can go create an account on. It's totally free. There's a whole library of content that you can engage with, but we don't want you to stop there. We don't want you to just engage with the content, read the content, maybe watch a video. We want you to activate that content. We want you to deploy it out to your congregation, share it with a friend. And so we've given you free texting tools to do just that. And what we've done is we've just gone out and we've told donors your story, churches, of the impact that you're having and the importance and the role of the church in the local cities. The impact that a thriving church has on a community is massive, by the way. Like the data is just enormous. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation that we could talk about, is the social impact of churches. Well, we go tell that story to donors, and donors say, well, we want to fund that for 100 churches in my city. And thankfully, donors have, risen up, and they have covered the cost of that for now. We've just passed, I believe, 60 or 65,000 churches. I'll get it wrong. Maybe north of 65,000 churches now that donors have helped cover the cost on to use the Gloo platform.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just thought people should know about that in case they don't already. So just to kind of move towards the end here, I think it's just saying, is there anything that you think people should know about, like platforms, things coming up, like if people are going to kind of take next steps with Gloo, what kind of stuff might you want church leaders out there to know about?
Such a great question. One is definitely the idea of just finding the right things that are going to meet the needs of your local ministry. Every single ministry has a different fingerprint, and we know that, and we've recognized that, and so have all of the partners. All the partners that have risen up. There's lots of hubs on Gloo, things like The Chosen or He Gets Us Hub, for example. Lots of technology hubs that are out there, lots of service provider hubs that are out there. And you can go out and you can find content across any of those partners. You can figure out what makes sense for your church. Pretty soon, we're going to start to ask more questions about it. And we're going to try to connect the answers to your questions to the content that you can find and explore and deploy. We also have a lot of those services that are out there. I have this kind of hub and spoke visual that explain how Gloo is doing all of these things behind the scenes and kind of empowering these mega ministries or these large parachurch ministries to do really cool things. For several years, we've had a lot of that firepower pointed internally at our own products and services that we're trying to launch. we've recognized in the last several months that it's time to now point those to other ministries and say, how could you benefit from an AI service? How would you use this match engine in the things that you're already doing? How might you benefit from some of the economies of scale that we've been able to negotiate? What about the network partners that, go to these events and all these different things that we do? And so now it's about pointing those services to those large ministries. We're launching that enterprise division as we speak. There's a lot of things out there at Gloo, but ultimately we exist to connect things. That is the story of Gloo, is to connect, a champion to a person who needs help, or to connect a champion to the right piece of content at the right time, or, connect a local ministry to the right network. All of those different things need to be connected. A lot of people think, I'll finish with this. A lot of people think about the sort of the circles out there and how their own circle, they can just absolutely crush it. And not too many people think about the lines that connect those circles. Our hope is to be the lines that connect the circles and really start to connect all of the different ministries out there, really just so that we can pursue God's ultimate design and purpose in unity. And that's the mission that we're on.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's very great what Gloo's doing, and that's huge fans, and I'm obviously just glad to be a part of the conversation. So thank you so much for what you guys are doing, Steele, and for what Gloo's doing. And that's where we're very, very thankful. So thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, super grateful for missional marketing, David, and just what you guys are doing. It's really, really important work. You guys have been on the cutting edge of how you think about this technology and church, and you are doing such a wonderful job just in your thought leadership, David. The church is definitely better for it. So appreciate your commitment and your ongoing partnership. Thanks a lot.